Može? Okay. Hello to everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Igor Joshevski, and yeah, I would be one of the speakers today of this event of the CodeTalks from Seavus. So, really brief info about Seavus. Seavus is an international company on the market for 22 years so far. So we are really spread across Europe with multiple offices, and in total, currently, we have 900 employees within Seavus, but we are also part of Arikoma Group, where we have way more companies that work with us, and also a lot of new customers and a lot of employees. So really shortly about Arikoma. Arikoma is a big IT investor. And currently, yeah, as I mentioned, we are more than 3,500 employees working together on interesting projects related to the IT, of course, but mainly following the latest trends and newest technologies. So as part of this CodeTalks today, I will be your first speaker. So yeah, my topic for today is MicroFrontends architecture, which is a buzzword that is, let's say, really interesting in the past year and a half. I mean, there were some talks before, like should we go in this direction or not? But definitely from really recently, it became really interesting. So yeah. We'll cover the part, why should we use microfrontends, when should we use them, and at the end of the day, should we use them? So let's begin. Okay. So yeah, who's talking? Some of you already know me. I'm Igor Joshevski. I'm working as a technology line manager in Seavus. I'm here for 8.5 years, and yeah, my experience is broad within front-end world, so I'm covering a lot of different libraries and frameworks, as well as practices, code standards, and pretty much everything else that is part of the front-end world itself. So, once upon a time, actually, not that while ago, it's actually in the mid-90s, we got JavaScript as a new language, which is somewhere around 1995. And yeah, its era or its lifespan has started to grow. Back in the time, just a second. Back at the time, it was not really popular because it was a really new language. It doesn't have a lot of documentation, and developers were still focused on the desktop applications, or actually building desktop applications. So when we start to build applications for web, mainly front-end part was part or actually bundled within the backend part itself. So when we were doing deployment, we were having one huge bundle that contains the backend part and the front-end part as well. As you can see on the image here, we can see that everything related to JavaScript or jQuery was bundled later in the backend part. Here I have icon from Java, but it doesn't really matter which backend we are going to use. And both together actually as one bundle were transferred to a server, where at that time, because we didn't have SVN or Git or anything else for code revisioning, actually we were mostly using FTP, and we had a lot of problems with it, especially when we were working as a team. But yeah, one interesting part is that the code we had within every page was like alert, welcome to my website. And that was like huge discovery. Like any user can come to your website and it can get a pop-up that says welcome to my website. That was like killer feature of the whole front-end part. Of course, we had HTML standard 4 as well. We had CSS, but this piece here, alert, welcome to my website, was the killer feature. So yeah, later we've got jQuery from some cool guys that had developed it. And this piece of code of welcome to my website has changed to document ready, alert, welcome to my website. So it was like awesome. And yeah, I think it was beautiful. But back then we didn't use JavaScript a lot. We didn't do a lot of stuff with JavaScript. It was 1995, 96. And it was early beginning of internet website and popularity. So the people were focused on content mainly instead of doing some fancy websites or whatever the case is. Therefore, a couple of years later, we got to monolith but split architecture, where many new features were actually not just features, but also libraries, tooling stuff, and everything else was introduced to the development world. So also we've got the new HTML5 APIs that provide us with a lot of fancy stuff like video support, native video support, native audio support. We were not dependable on Flash anymore, because Flash was used really much before. And here, actually, we also got the first framework for JavaScript, which is AngularJS. And together with React.js library, actually, we were able to create self-hosted or dedicated, or as you wish, split front-end from the backend side that can be hosted individually and that can work as an individual application. Of course, we were using a lot of libraries for tooling, like Gulp, Grunt, and many others that I'm not going to mention because the list is really long. But yeah, first standards of single-page applications were introduced here. So we've got a pattern of how we should create these single-page applications. What is a single-page application? What is the things that we should pay focus at the beginning, then the second stage of development, and of course the final product. So as well, having Git made a lot of improvement of how we deliver code and how we work together as a team, because besides we were able to split the HTML and the backend part as individual applications. Using Git, we were also able to have different timetable or time frames for delivering of the product itself, but also we were able actually to deploy on the server individually, which means that either the front end or the backend part can have different timetables and different deliveries that later they can actually work together as a one application. And yeah, of course, for the first time, because of AngularJS as a framework, we were able actually to implement the model view controller pattern as a part of the front-end applications, and actually to be able to come a little closer to the standards of the backend development. Because previously, when we had jQuery, mainly we were writing scripts within the files, but those scripts were not related together. They were working like a standalone, and the code was messy, and we face a lot of situations where we can repeat the same piece of code in different files because, yeah, I don't know. We were including different files for different HTMLs, and yeah, it has a lot of code depth. It didn't have good reusability, but yeah, at the end of the day, together with the MVC pattern, of course, object-oriented programming concepts, the front-end became more popular. And yeah, also the front-end application became more user-friendly. Because previously, each of the users had to click on the button, then wait for the page to refresh and to get some other content displayed or be navigated or redirected to another site. While with these single-page applications that we've got as a pattern, we actually got the potential for the users to stay on the same page without redirections, to have better UI and better applications. So as the time was passing, actually a lot of progress was made first on the backend side, where we've got a new pattern there, new architecture called MicroServices, where pretty much everything that was possible to be split in smaller applications or smaller modules was split on the backend side, while the front end still had kept to have one monolith application, just dedicated one. So here we've got, of course, Dockers, Kubernetes, cloud, messaging queues, a lot of other stuff. And of course, because of the popularity of JavaScript, we had new library in JavaScript or new framework in JavaScript pretty much for every single day in the year. Like we've got the three major, Vue.js, React, and Angular, but also we have many others that were claiming that their, I don't know, framework or library is better. You should use that instead of Angular. You should use that instead of React, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because you can use whatever you want or whatever you feel that you are skilled. But you should actually create a functional application. So having that in mind, we actually got these three major frameworks where pretty much all of the developers had put focus. And yeah, at least from the front-end part, except from the framework or library, nothing has changed. Actually, what has changed was the communication between the backend and the frontend. Now, instead of having one backend where we should send API calls, we had multiple microservices. And each of them had different purposes, so we had to contact each of them for different purpose. And of course, at that time, we've got this new sugar syntax keyword called class. Yay. So with ECMAScript 6 standard, we actually got classes within JavaScript. Not that it wasn't possible before to have classes. We were doing that, writing that, but they were not called classes specifically. They were called functions or constructor functions. But yeah, at the end of the day, this ECMAScript standard makes the life easier for us, introducing this as a keyword, and had more sense to us for the applications that we were planning to build or the code willing to write. So yeah, later we also got Angular version 2 that actually introduced us to the TypeScript, which is a subset language of JavaScript, but provide us with a lot of new functionalities that JavaScript doesn't support currently. And with that, actually, it makes us way more easier to organize and to have better code at the end of the day. And also easier to follow these code patterns or code standards like, I don't know, MVVM, MVC, or pretty much any other. And yeah, hence we start to use this regardless TypeScript or ECMAScript standard, or using a framework like Angular or Vue.js or React. Actually, we got to the point where now the front end can be actually packed within a Docker, actually Docker image, which later can be scaled, easily transported to many different cloud providers, and as well, we've got to the point where actually we can have meaningful continuous integration and continuous delivery process established. So by doing that, actually we can deploy the front end just in seconds, pretty much everywhere on any platform. So yeah, as the time has passed, it become really natural as a process. If the backend has microservices, then we should have microfrontends as well. Why? Because in that case, we can follow what's happening on the backend side, but also we can split the code in some logic ways or domain specific ways in terms to have better organization of the teams, better organization of the work, and yeah, to provide even more efficient web application to the users, because the desktop applications are almost non-existing currently. So like pretty much we barely can see some desktop application that you should install to do something online. Pretty much everything is happening online, which means that we should pay a lot of attention of how we are going to build the front-end part as well, the backend, and how performant it is, how user-friendly it is, and pretty much everything related to one application. So yeah, having those different libraries, different frameworks, now it doesn't really matter which one we are going to use, because now we can organize the teams to work independently. Like if we have a team of 40 developers, we can split them in smaller teams called tribes, where each of the team can decide which kind of library or which kind of framework they are going to use in terms to produce something meaningful of the project. And as well, we've got GVT tokens. Actually, we had them before, not that we were waiting for MicroFrontends, but GVTS tokens provided us the possibility to be independable in terms of backend session that previously was really important for us. Now we can use the tokens to identify to any backend that serves the same application, and also that pretty much can be decoded there. And having that token actually can assign us to pretty much any backend from the same product. And yeah, with that, actually, we are able now to split the application, regardless in how many different modules. For each of the modules or micro-frontends, actually, we can have different build process. That's really important, because actually what's happening here, regardless of what we are going to use on the front end, now we can do actually, this front end is always going to follow this backend in terms of timeline, which means that they will decide together when they are going to develop something new for the backend, when they are going to roll out something new on the backend side. So the front-end developers can cover that part in their micro-frontend and later roll out as well. They can wait themselves in terms to roll out together, or they can have individual or independent rollouts. It really depends on what kind of product you are developing and how dependable the front-end is from the backend side. Because some operations now can happen only on the front-end side, and we don't have the need to communicate with the backend, but sometimes it's really crucial and important, everything that happens on the front-end to be passed to the backend side, so the backend would be also able to take some further actions. On most of the pictures, pretty much you saw that the database is always one block. It's really not important in this case. I mean, we can split the database as well to many sub-databases that are linked to only one specific microservice on the backend side, or we can just use one database for all micro backends or microservices. But yeah, this is just to save some space when I was creating the images itself. So yeah, also with this, we've got many new concepts on the front-end side, and also many new libraries like monorepo, storybook, framework agnostic components, and hooks for React, which actually has changed the way how we think, how we build the components, and how we develop the end product. Here we gain a lot of benefits of the reusability, of course, if we build everything well. And of course, we can actually have a lot of integration between these MicroFrontends in an easy way using monorepo, and also for the UA part, we can decide to use the same style across all MicroFrontends, or maybe they can use different styles for the UA part. It doesn't really matter, but storybooks help us here in terms to be able to see what's happening on the front end, or one specific front end in terms of design, and do we want to use that or reuse that in another micro front end. So yeah, on this image here, actually it's explained how we are going to split the product in micro teams in terms for them to work in following micro frontends as a architecture. But yeah, I will also speak about the benefits of micro frontend development. So imagine you have e-commerce website. That's the end product, where you have the standard module for payments, module for products, module for orders, CRM, leads, shipment, and pretty much everything that can be part of the of the product itself. So if we take them as a logic parts, they can work individually. They still depend on each other. Like in terms to have an order, you need to have products, you need to make payments, but at the end of the day, they can work individually as a micro frontends. With that, actually, we can have many different teams so far as we have a chance to identify something to be as an individual independent module. We can actually have a dedicated team to work on that. So here I have only basic split up. Like the first team is going to work on the reporting part. The second team is going to work on the payments. Then the third team is going to work on the shop, and the fourth team on something else. It doesn't really matter. But the most crucial part here is that each of them now can use different framework or library. They are not obliged to work together in one framework or one library. So as I've mentioned, if we have 40 developers as a team, now we can split them in terms in which they are the best. Like if we have 10 developers that are best in Angular, it's really natural or good decision to put them to work on the shop part where we decided to use Angular. Then if we have, I don't know, another 10 developers that are good in React, we are going to let them to work on the payment part because, yeah, we need the speed there, we need a lot of stuff. I mean, it depends on many different stuff, how we are going to define which team on what is going to work and what they are going to use as a library or framework. But at the end of the day, here for each of these sub-products, we have individual Git repos that have individual build processes, so they don't have to follow each other. Actually, we can decide that for example, Vue.js part can be a couple of versions ahead with development and features in comparison to React and AngularJS, and vice versa. I mean, we can do all the combinations. So what are the benefits? We can do better team and product organization. We can have less code depth and more reusable code, because if we build framework agnostic components, that means that one time when we build one component, we can reuse it regardless of which library or framework we are going to use later. Then we have independent processes for each sub-project with different timelines, so we are not stick all to one definite timeline. We can all have different timelines for each of the teams. Some of them might move faster, some of them might move slower, but it doesn't really matter until we are having functional product. Then reusability of the sub-application between other projects. Okay, so we have reusable sub-applications between other products. What does this mean? When we, for example, if we take the payments part, if we build the payment part as a micro frontend and micro backend service, and for example, we are using just PayPal there, that means that that one as a module can be reused to pretty much any other application. We don't have to rebuild for every new product that we have or every new application we are going to build to rebuild the payment module. We have it already done. We are just using that. Maybe we will have the UI part, like the design, styles, colors, whatever. But pretty much everything else in terms of functionality and that can be related to application is already done. With that, we also got unit test, the code that is tested, proven to work. We had that documentation ready. We have build processes ready. And also what is interesting, if we are using monorepo, for example, all the updates that we are going to make for one product can be applied really easily to all other products that are using the same module. For example, if we put the payments as a module, as a micro frontend in monorepo, and we use it on 10 different applications, we can actually just put some updates to the core repository of the payments, and later, whenever we need the payments, we can apply them just from updating from this main repository, and everything else is going to be linked and is going to work. Of course, there are use cases where something we don't need, it's extra, or maybe not planned for that product. That's okay. We can work on that, but at the end of the day, this is one of the benefits. Then there is no extension limits of the product. Like, I mean, even if we build monolithic application, we can develop endless features, like we can always add something new. But here, because everything is split, we don't have any limits. We are simply adding new module, or actually new microfront and new micro backend, and they are doing something. We are going to decide, are we going to use them or not? That's actually decision related to the business domain and the product itself. Then, of course, is in replacement of one or many modules. Like, we can easily shut them down by simply disabling their URLs or routing or whatever we are going to use to access them. But in case we find out that that specific library or framework doesn't serve us well, we have a lot of security issues, performance issues, or whatever the case is, we can easily rebuild the same functionality with another library or another framework. So we are not going to change the whole application. We are going to change this small part only. And then for the teams, it's really important that they don't have to know the whole application. I mean, they should be aware about the whole picture, the big picture, but they don't have to know every single detail of the code of the application itself and its features. They should take care about their part and what they are doing there. Of course, it's really good if they have time to learn everything else that is part of the application, but they should pretty much stick to their functionality, their module. And yeah, here we have shared ownership of the product instead of centralized one, which means that each of these teams is going to have a separate team leader or architect that will take care about the standards, about how the application is going to be developed, how it's going to be integrated, etc., etc. While when we work in a monolithic way, pretty much we have one or maximum two team leads that are taking care about these parts, and yeah, sometimes they make more mess instead of making the things going better. Okay, so how actually these micro frontends can communicate between them? It's really interesting topic, because if we build this product as micro frontend, the main idea is they don't have to communicate between them ever. I mean, they work as individual applications, they do their job. There is completely no need for them to communicate between them. Everything can be retrieved as data from the, let's say, backend side or whatever the case is. But yeah, still happens that, for example, if we take, I don't know, Facebook, or we take AliExpress or any other popular web application, there is a case where if you have multiple tabs open, you have, and also in each tab you are loading different module. When you change something within the first tab, that change should be affected to all tabs later, because you want to have real-time or up-to-date data displayed. Like I'm ordering, I don't know, one computer from first tab, I should see that as an info to other tabs as well, regardless where I am. When I open the basket, I should see that something has been ordered. And I should do that without having some page refresh or stuff like that. If that's the case, then we have multiple ways how to communicate between the MicroFrontends. So yeah, as I mentioned, by default, they actually don't have to communicate between them, because they will be loaded from different subdomains, or maybe they will have different subroutes. Whatever the case is, they don't have to communicate. The first way of how they can communicate, and probably the easiest one, is to wrap them within iframe. So you'll have to build one application that will serve as a shell, and within that application you will include all of these sub-frontends. And because they are sharing the same domain, or actually you can define that, on the backend side, you are allowed to share data directly to the iframe itself and to get them from the iframe. Another way, which is a little bit more complicated, is to use the window messaging or post message API, from where you can actually exchange messages between the tabs or different domains. The main thing here is that they have to subscribe to this messaging queue, and to know when they should activate and on which message they should take some action, and actually what they should do. Then you can have dedicated routes, actually sub-routes under the same domain. And because we are under the same domain, we can actually use the local storage and share the data through the local storage, or session storage as well. And again, for this same domain approach, we can actually use service workers and web workers, because they are under same domain. So it's really easy to put observable over local storage, or to put observable over web worker, and to track for any changes, so later something will change. And of course, using URLs as a final resort in terms of how you can pass something in query parameters from one microfrontend to another microfrontend. In terms for that second microfrontend to be able to pick up the data and do something later with it. So those are actually the ways how you can communicate, but also there are some downsides of microfrontends. Like there is always the question, should I use them? When should I use them? Or are they really good? I will say that most likely the best idea is to start with one monolith application, regardless is that on the backend or the frontend side. But keep in mind always to organize the code with lazy modules, or simply have it separated within modules, regardless of how they are going to be included. So in case anytime in future you spot that some parts of the application should become microservices or microfrontends, you can easily extract them from this big monolith and make them microfrontends. So yeah, great power comes with great responsibility. So what are the downsides or the cons? Actually, we have increased size of repository, integrations, and number of servers, which will require a lot of DevOps or more DevOps people that will take care about this. Then the core and reusable components should be perfectly planned, which means until we get to one good reusable component, pretty much, or probably we are going to spend some maybe 10 iteration till we get to the code that can be reused within any application afterwards. But you cannot plan that precisely at the beginning of the development. So of course, if you have some junior, it will build something that works for one application, but if you try to reuse that in another one, it will be useless. So it's really important to plan the stuff here really good. Then the testing of the application is more complex compared when we have actually compared to monolith architecture, because here we are not just doing unit tests about our piece of code or about our microfrontend. We also should do integration testing to check is our piece of microfrontend working well with all others, and end-to-end tests in terms to verify that when I do some redirect from one microfrontend to another, that everything works well. Then a variety of standards that should be followed. This is probably the most painful part of microfrontends, because if we implement things using Vue, React, and Angular, we should follow 3 different standards here. And they all have best practices, they all have different code guidelines, code standards, and pretty much also we can complicate this by adding MVC, functional programming, MVVM as code patterns. And this becomes really hard to be followed and to be maintained. But of course, if we have dedicated teams, dedicated leaders, it's not impossible. Then additional effort is required for the continuous integration and delivery processes, because now every individual microfrontend should have individual continuous integration and continuous delivery as a process developed and initialized. Then probably the most important thing is not suitable for every project. So you cannot push microfrontends everywhere. Like, yeah, it's cool, I'm going to put it everywhere. If it's really important to know the big picture of the project, to do proper analysis, and to see is really possible or not possible to have this microfrontend as an architecture. So here, if you have really small projects like tic-tac-toe, I mean, you can build it with microfrontends, but there is really no need of doing that. But if you have, for example, huge e-commerce platform, then most likely it would be a good idea, at least maybe not everything, but some parts to be done with microfrontends. And yeah, increased need of project manager and project management tools. Because previously, when we were working on monolith applications or monolith architectures, we had one project manager, for example, and one project within Jira, and that was all. We just had to take care about which task is related to the front-end part, which task is related to the back-end part, and that was all. But now we have that scaled, multiplied about how many different microfrontends we are going to have. So if we have 10 microfrontends and as well 10 microservices on the backend, that means that we'll have to track 10 different Jira projects where everybody is following their stuff and doing different things. Okay, so how you should decide? I would try to go a little bit faster. So when to decide to have this architecture applied on your project. So as I've said, how complex the application is, it's the first rule. Like if you have really simple application, it's not worth it to go with microfrontends. Then how big the team size is. Like if you have only 3 developers within the team, what's the point of doing microfrontends where actually you will end up to having no team, because there will be one-man band working on their part. Then, is there any actual user-related need to implement something different in a way of micro-frontend aside from what you have currently? Is there any performance issue that probably Angular is going to have? So you have to implement here React. If that's the case, then okay, maybe it's good to go in a micro-frontends architecture, but probably you are not going to split everything. You are going to split only some parts of the application itself. Then does your current hosting or cloud provider supports that kind of architecture? Because when we go on the cloud, nowadays that's possible. It's really great, but if you have a dedicated server from previously, maybe by default is not going to support it, so you will end up with a lot of configurations, especially if it's a dedicated server where you need a sysadmin or DevOps doing a lot of stuff there in terms to allow you to have this architecture applied. And yeah, one of the important things, are there any skilled architects and as well product owners or product managers as part of the team? Because those are probably the most important guys that are going to follow the whole process. If you have bad architect, he will tell you like, okay, use whatever you want, do it like ever you want, and we don't care until we have some result. And yeah, sometimes that's okay, but you will pretty much end up with nothing. It would be better to go with monolith. At least you will have something to work instead of having 10 unfunctionable micro-frontends. And yeah, when it's also good when you have multiple teams, because due to COVID now we all work remotely. When you have multiple teams from different companies or locations, so it happens that at least in Seavus to have clients that are having their own teams, and they are willing from us to join to work with them as another team, or maybe mix with their team. And sometimes it's really good idea to split the project between multiple micro-frontends as well backends, and to split the teams regardless, are we going to split them by their origin company or company of origin, or we are going to split them by functionality, by having them mixed. Still, it's way easier to maintain the code and to deliver things, because it happens sometimes that clients are lazy, not delivering on time, and we have a lot of issues. So that's pretty much everything I had. I will skip the demo because it will take a lot of time, but I will upload on Git so you can take it from there. Does any of you have any questions now? Or if you don't have now, you can come up later during after the second presentation. English, please. Okay, so I will repeat the question because you don't have mic. So the question was, have I worked on micro-frontend projects earlier, actually enterprise project, because as Marian had said, it was an issue for him previously when he was trying to implement that 2 years ago. And yeah, I agree with you to some point that is an issue to implement micro-frontends on existing and large project, but it really depends on what's the vision of the product owner and the architects and the leads. Because if they have wrong vision, pretty much you will end up in trouble. If they have good idea, good vision, pretty much you will end up on a good way. Yeah, I've been using that I mean, I've been using MicroFrontends so far on commercial projects as well. And we always have started with Monolith, but because we were using mainly Angular, we kept everything with feature modules, actually lazy load modules. Later, when we see the opportunity that something can be optimized and as well to be split as a different project, we decided to go with MicroFrontends, but the main concept here was not to make confusion between MicroFrontends and microvidgets. We split the code where one part of the code is working under domain A, then the second part is working under domain B. So only way how they communicate between them is just through URL query params, doing redirects with query params. Of course, they can pull the data from the database, but if we need to display something immediately for some user, then we use these redirects. And this was good approach for us. Actually, we were building huge social network, and this was really okay for us. It was working well. But yeah, it has its own downsides, because once when we split the code, we get to the point, okay, we now need 2 project managers instead of 1, because now we have different timetables and deadlines that we should follow. And it's really hard for one planner, regardless is that a lead or project manager, to follow those 2 different paths. So yeah, it really depends on the team at the end of the day, but it's not impossible, and definitely it takes some time to make good planning before you dive into micro frontends on existing product. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks for the answer, as I said.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
now let me not take up more time if someone wants to ask something else.
Okay. There are some questions online on YouTube. Okay, so there is question like, do you use a framework or library for utilizing micro-frontend architecture like single SPA? In our case and in practice, pretty much no, because single SPA somehow refers to the approach where we are going to use iframes. So there is pretty much no need to implement additional libraries because we don't have any benefit of it. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's, I mean, if you have it as a practice, if you have it as knowledge so far, it's okay to use it. Let me see. Okay, how we can how we can share the state between micro frontends, like when we are buying something application add-on 1 and cart application 2 should increase the number of items both. So to this, it really depends, are the both micro frontends on the same domain. If they're under the same domain, just using subroutes, in that case, they can both access to the store and the state of the store immediately. But of course, if they are not under the same domain, like you are using subdomains or iframe or whatever the case is, you can always actually use the local storage, again, if they share at least the same core domain, or using this window post-message communication, where by default, both micro-frontends are going to subscribe to this micro-frontend, to this window post-message API. So whenever new message is sent, regardless from which frontend, it's going to be received from others and processed later, like should it does any refresh of the data, or should just simply update the cart with items within the cart. I mean, you have a lot of possibilities later. The idea is just to pass the first signal that something has changed in the application 1, so the application 2 can pick it up and proceed later with updates. Okay, so yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions here. So yeah, thank you for your time. We are going to have 5-minute break and we will be ready for the second presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So, hello everyone, my name is Dimitar and I'm a front-end developer. I have been working with Seavus. So, I have been working with Angular for the past 3 years, and today I'm going to talk about the code smells in Angular applications, and I'm going to share some of the common pitfalls Angular devs fall into, how they emerged, and what can we do to prevent them from happening again. So, I'm presenting you my first code smell of today, which is about the usage of absolute paths within the imports, and this can be caused by two factors. So A, it can be caused by poor folder structure, and B, it can be caused by poor TypeScript configuration. So could have actually a folder structure that is poorly designed or implemented, but that won't change the amount of relative paths you have in your project. And especially as the project scales into a bigger application, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. But if you have something like this, which is called a tsconfig JSON, so this is out of the box generated when you init a new Angular project, you could set up the paths so you can use the absolute paths in your component, which will give you a result of this. So it's much cleaner and it's maintainable and it's very easy to read, right? So in comparison, you see that the first one is easier to read. So, okay, this was my first code smell. Right now, I'm going to talk about the usage of type any. I bet everyone who works with TypeScript or Angular have seen this piece of code, and you're all familiar. It's everywhere. It's in our day-to-day work. So yeah, for those who don't know, because I can see a lot of people here that don't have a coding background, TypeScript is a programming language that is designed and maintained by Microsoft. It's basically a superset of JavaScript. It has all the features JavaScript has, but also it has its own. And the most important one is the usage of static typing. So what's the point of developing in TypeScript if you don't take the full advantage of it, right? So instead of using type any, we can use simply types, right? So we add types to our properties, and with adding types, our code will be cleaner and it's easier to work in the future. Errors you could have will be detected at compile time instead of runtime. And basically, you will do yourself a favor and a favor to your fellow colleagues, right? And so, while we are on the subject of static typing, I want to mention this. So, this is nothing but a standard Angular form, right? This is not a code smell, okay? So, this is not a code smell. So, this is something I want to talk about for a while, and I believe a lot of you will find this interesting. Can anyone see what might be a problem here? So there is nothing special, nothing fancy. We just have a regular reactive form in Angular. Does anybody knows what might be the underlying issue right here we're having with this form right now? Okay, so I'll take that as a no. So the problem in reactive forms is that they are not static typed. They are not strongly typed. And we try our best to make our codes strongly typed, but when it comes to reactive forms, we kind of like shut our eyes and we're blind. But that's not the point. And I have been following this for a while, and as you know, Angular is an open source project that is maintained by Google, but anyone can contribute it. And if you have if you want to do it, you can research this and try to contribute yourself. So there is an issue for 2016, and that's like 5 years from now. And there's a guy saying why we don't have strongly typed forms, right? So that guy has a point. We should have strongly typed forms because it will make our code much cleaner, and it has all the benefits I mentioned in the strongly typed. So right now I'm going to show you a workaround of how you can make your form strongly typed. So what you can do, you can simply create a helper class which will extend your Angular form groups and create a generic type of it. And also you can rewrite your custom property to a dynamic type. And when you do that, the results will be this. So this is much better, it's much cleaner, and it's more maintainable. Because you have a form, but all those forms have types, you know. So first time has a type of string, the last time has a type of string, and it's all following that user model. So yeah, this is something I want to see. I was expecting this to see in Angular release 12, but we didn't, unfortunately, and I hope we see in some of the next releases. Okay, so right now we're having the Homer Simpson website, which is pretty jungling, and I don't know, everything is dancing around and it's all funny. And this code smell is, for me, the most important one of all. And I'm going to talk now about lazy loading. Lazy loading is a process of loading different modules into your applications where you take the application down, tear it apart, and make different modules. And as you, which are called chunks, and as you interact with the website, so the website, those modules are rendered on demand. So instead of loading them all at once, like this, you could have something like this, which are modules or chunks that are loaded as the user interacts with the website. And with this approach, you will actually have a much, you will gain on performance, and your website will be a lot faster than popping that at once. Okay, so yeah, this is it for lazy loading. And this is how your router should be configured. So in your application router, if you don't see something like this, then you want to go ahead and try to refactor it. Next point I want to talk about is, okay, so here we have a text area, which is nothing fancy. It's just simple text area, which has a value property binded to a method. Right now, I'm going to talk about the usage of methods inside templates and why it's such a bad practice. So for those who work in Angular, you already know that Angular has 8 lifecycle methods, and 7 of them are being triggered while the user interacts with the application, right? The last one is ng and destroy, which I'm not going to mention it. So you have those lifecycle methods, right? And in this get address, we're calling this get address method, which is nothing fancy. We're just returning the address to the value, and we're binding it. So, so we are binding it, and there's something happening under the hood of this approach, and I'm going to show you right now. So if I do a console log on that method and try to print out everything that is happening under the hood, you'll see a lot of logs. And if you have if your method has a more complex code, then that can cause a serious performance issues. Okay, and basically that is bad practice, and you want to avoid it all the time. You can use something like template literals instead of having that method returning the string or values. Okay, so I know it's hard, and when you want to, like, maybe you want to bind a click, and that is fine. But if you want to use a method to try to get the values of something, that's the not right way to do it. Instead, you can use template literals, as I mentioned. So yeah, that's basically it. In last time you saw on the strong typing, you saw that $sign. For those who don't know, right now I'm going to talk about observables. And observables are, right now I'm going to talk about subscription inside another subscription, but also about observables. So for those who don't have the coding background, observables is like a stream with data, and to get the data, you actually have to subscribe to it. And I made an analogy which has YouTube in it. So if you have a YouTube account and you subscribe to your favorite YouTuber, when they make a new video, when they push a new video, you will get a notification like, hey, I made a new video, right? And you will get that notification. You're getting the data. You are subscribed to that data. Okay, and that is about observables. Right now, in this example, we have nested observables, and which is not a good practice. Technically, this code will work, but it's not the most effective way. Instead of having nested observables, you can have something like this, which use the combined latest RxJS operator, so you can put as many observables as you like, and it will merge all of them, and you get the data as well. So in this piece of code, there's also one more code smell I want to talk about, and it's the last one for this presentation. So there's something wrong with this code as well. And it's wrong because we subscribe to it. In Angular, when we subscribe to it, when we subscribe to an observable and we don't unsubscribe, that can cause memory leaks in your application. And a memory leak is one of the worst types of issues you might have. It's hard to find, it's hard to debug, and often it's hard to solve. So I'm gonna give you 3 best practice of how you can unsubscribe to an observable. First one is with the usage of take until operator, which the ng unsubscribe right here in this example, and that is simply a subscription. And when you destroy the component, you also unsubscribe. In other words, you destroy that observable. The second way, and my personal favorite, is the usage of async pipe, which simply does everything for you. It automatically unsubscribe from the code, and yeah, that's it. So you will have less code in your component, which will make your component leaner, and that is the way to go, right? We want to keep our components clean and lean as much as we can. And the third but not least, the last but not least, is the take operator, which will take, like you're telling it, it's also an RxJS operator, and you will take 1 in it, and after the data comes, it's done, and it's over. The observable is destroyed by itself. So basically, that's it for my presentation. So thank you all. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in the LAN talks. Yeah, and we'll have 5-minute breaks. Chetelev.
Može, može. Tamo работа.
Kao ti čitamo pišanja.
Neki rinak ima. Okay. So yeah, I hope you had interesting time hearing these two presentations, and I also believe that probably some of you would have additional questions. So we will continue with the TheLionTalks, where this time actually it's planned for all of you to raise your questions, to ask your questions. We'll initially we plan to have 50 minutes talks, but yeah, eventually if we need longer, it's also okay. So I don't know, those some of you here or the guys here, guys and girls following us online have any question to ask, please let us know. While we wait actually from questions from you, I will actually ask some questions to Dimitar. So yeah, Dimitar, your topic was really great. But yeah, did you had a chance to see some of these code smells on the project where you're currently working? And can you maybe, I don't know, describe how you have resolved them?
Yeah, so in a way, I am hired to improve the code quality of my project right now where I'm working. And as you can see, I mean, on those code smells where we have the type any, we had a lot of linked issues, and etc. So what I did is also what you might have in your project. A lot of Angular projects have the TS-lint, which is deprecated since 2019, I believe. And what I did is I migrated that project to ESLint. I also placed some Husky, which is a library where you have the pre-commit hooks. And with the juniors developers working on the project, right, they see the problem, that code smell that I presented, they see it instantly, like the whatever text editor they're using, with the VS Code, that it's like crying about, please fix me. I don't want to have type any. Also, I want to have return type on the functions. I want my code to be well linted, and yeah, basically that's it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Sounds great. And yeah, also, what's your recommendation about using data models within Angular project, especially when, let's say, you don't know what to expect from the API? Like you're not certain what kind of fields are returned until you, I don't know, probably make some integration and find out later. Like, would you suggest using any for start until you get the details you need? So you are not going to, let's say, delay your code or your development. And later, when you get those details, actually, you can actually make proper types, interfaces, and everything else.
Yeah, so if, let's say, in your case, that the API is not ready and we don't have a documentation of it, we might know what we are working with. Of course, you can put any, but I will strongly suggest that also you use a to-do. So you like place a little placeholder there in the future when the backend gets ready, or you're working with mocks, whatever, you can put the any type, but yeah, I will like make a small note that this needs to be fixed and converted to a data type.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I hope that was beneficial for all of you to hear it. So I don't know. Do we have any question from people following us online? Okay. So yeah, I was willing to actually mention one thing in terms of the frontend MicroFrontends architecture, which it's, let's say, really important. it's actually not to mess them with MicroFrontends. With MicroFrontend widgets. I mentioned it in the presentation, but I didn't explain it well. So the idea here is that if we speak about MicroFrontends as individual projects, they, by default, they do not communicate between them. But if we speak about MicroFrontend widgets, then we speak about completely different thing, which means that if some of you were using, for example, WordPress in the past, or currently you are probably most familiar about the widgets and the plugins and what they are doing. But the same concept applies here, where I can have one component doing some interesting thing, like maybe, I don't know, weather component displaying just the weather details about specific location. So that component actually don't have to be individual front-end project. It can be just one simple component that does what it does and later just be injected or integrated within the front-end project. That front-end project, it doesn't have to be this micro-front-end architecture. It can be just simple singleton or simple monolith application which actually injects different widgets from these smaller components. And so far, I have tried this with Angular as a core to inject many different other widgets, like from React and from Vue.js, Svelte, and any other, which is really okay. And it works well, but the main point here is how you're going to use Angular to do that. Are you going to use, for example, components and TypeScript, or you're going to use pipes or directives or services? So probably, now it still depends on what you're doing, but probably the best approach for cases like this is to use directives, where you will bind them to one, I don't know, div element and display the content within from the directive itself. So yeah, that would be all I forgot to mention, but it was really important. I don't know, Dimitar, do you have some questions for me? Maybe?
Well, no, actually, I wanted to ask you what Marian asked you about. Do you have? Did you ever use microservice as in the real world? But you answered that. So
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe some of you came up with the idea for questions so far, or we are good for today. Probably we made it clear, or we were clear enough, and there are no other questions. But yeah, anyways, if any one of you want to ask something, feel free. Of course, you can always mail us or contact us directly with any questions you might have. Okay, so yeah, as I can see, there are no further questions. I would like to thank you all for participation today and for being here with us. And yeah, see you at the next CodeTalks, but I would rather see you even earlier of that. Thank you.